You're watching Mick and T Sports Report on CHCO. And now, here's two guys who slapped each other around on stage at the recent Community TV Awards show, Evan and Joe.
I'm Joe Ticotsky down in the Elm City, New Haven, Connecticut.
I'm Evan McFarlane up here in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, Canada, home of the Algonquin Golf Course that we're trying to open, but Mother Nature is not letting it happen.
This is episode 35 of Mick and T Sports Report. And as Mark mentioned in the opening, at our recent Community TV Awards show, which is sort of our Canadian Oscars, we unfortunately slapped each other around a bit on stage. You were played the part of Will, and I was Chris. So you were actually the one that did the slapping. Damn, did that hurt.
I mean, I gave you fair warning, Joe. I told you to keep the New England Patriots out of your mouth.
Oh, God. A couple quick sports tidbits, since I'm told at our base we are a sports show. Props to Becca Van Stone, former guest of ours, and her Yale women's hockey team, who made it to the NCAA Division I Frozen Four semifinals before they fell in overtime to eventual champion Ohio State.
Yeah, congrats, Becca. It's awesome to see a lot of the athletes that we have on here just rocket in their respective sports. And just on a little side note, this year in U.S. college women's basketball, it's the first year there is a Canadian player on all four teams in the Final Four. That
is impressive. Please don't totally take over the game.
Hey, we're trying, man. We're trying with that and soccer.
All right. It's a quick opening this time because we have two great interviews. And coming up next, we'll interview someone from the brand new Maritime Women's Basketball Association. But before we send you to break, we had to cut out the TV quiz and the music spotlight, but I have to throw in a little combination of that. I'm going to play that song again. That is such an earworm for me lately. The Littlest Hobo theme song. So good.
There's a voice that keeps on calling me down the road. That's where I'll always be. Every stop I make a new friend. Can't stay for long, just turn around and I'm gone again. Maybe tomorrow I'll wanna settle down.
Okay, enough of that. I can't get enough of that song. This is Mick and T's Sports Report on CHCO in St. Andrews. Welcome back to Mick and T's Sports Report on CHCO-TV. Our first guest is the founder of the brand new Maritime Women's Basketball Association, with play set to start next month. Let's find out some more about the league by welcoming in Brad Janes to the show. Welcome in, Brad.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. We got a whole laundry list of questions, so we'll get rolling. You told me that while you've played sports your whole life, you never really played basketball. So that begs the question, how the heck did you become the founder of a women's basketball league?
Strange things happen. My best friend was a very good basketball player, so I was at a lot of basketball games growing up, but never played. Hockey was my sport, but my wife and I have three girls who all played basketball, and I'm the type of personality that if I was going to be involved as a spectator or what have you, I'm going to learn a little bit about the game. So I always said that basketball is very similar to hockey. You just didn't have to worry about flaky goaltenders. So I got involved grassroots level when our girls were growing up here in Fredericton. And one thing led to another, and I have a marketing background and a journalism background, so I was able to do some work with Basketball in New Brunswick as a board member, and then became president for 2 terms, and certainly got to know the game and got my coaching levels, and just kind of morphed into it. And there's a few of us out there that have hockey backgrounds that have become involved in basketball. I'm glad I did. I really enjoy the game. And
Evan's one of the guys.
yeah. It just I guess sports, I have a lifetime of sports and organizing sports and helping create leagues. And it just seemed to be, I'm not going to say it was a natural extension to start the MWBA. It all started in 2020, probably 2 years ago now to the day, roughly. It started out with a Zoom call that Paul Hickey out of St. John was hosting Zoom calls when COVID first reached our shores, and we were all standing around wondering what to do. And one of his guests was former national women's team head coach Lisa Tomaitis, who it was actually the last question before they signed off. They asked what could help basketball in the country. And Lisa said, Canada is the only top FIBA playing nation that doesn't have its own domestic pro league. So my mind started going immediately, and I had just left basketball in New Brunswick. My wife said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Nothing." And next thing you know, I was like, well, hang on a second. So the MWBA kind of started as a bit of a pro model, but get the calculator out and things pretty much quickly deterred that just because of initial costs and everything. So we, with the basketball community being so small in the Maritimes, I reached out and we kind of said, well, what about an amateur league? And boom, that's kind of where we caught fire and have been continuing on for 2 years.
Excellent. Evan.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following along. I've got a few friends that are kind of involved with it too, and it's exciting to see happening. But can you give us kind of a glimpse of what the inaugural, 6 teams you've got lined up so far, and maybe what a scheduling format you've kind of got in mind?
Yeah, and COVID has been our number one obstacle. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Normally, if you're creating a league of any type, you're meeting somewhere face to face, and you're really able to hammer out a whole bunch of details on a weekend in Amherst or Truro or Sackville or wherever. But we've had to do it all over Zoom and through texting and emails. So that's been a bit of a challenge because if there are some conflicting opinions, it's not easy to always hammer those details out, through computer. But we did, and we had initially created a schedule that would see one-off games, like a regular league, playing on a Saturday in Windsor and then going into Halifax. But about just before level 3 had been dropped, we were concerned about the availability of gymnasiums through school systems. So we were looking at private facilities because we certainly wanted to play this year. And the idea was kind of hatched, well, what if we're going to use private facilities, maybe we go weekend dates where all 6 teams are in one place. And that kind of stuck, and it seemed like a good idea, kind of like an old home week celebration with 6 teams coming to one facility. And then level 3 was lifted, and we are where we are now. So May 14th and 15th will be the first weekend here in Fredericton with all 6 teams coming in. 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, and it'll have Nova Scotia teams playing New Brunswick teams. And then the provincial teams, us, Port City Fog of St. John, for instance, and Moncton Mystics will play games through the week, just head-to-head to flush out the regular season before we go to championship weekend in late June.
Okay, so you have three teams in Nova Scotia, 3 New Brunswick?
Right. Yep. There's 2 teams in Halifax, Halifax Hornets, Halifax Thunder, and the Windsor Edge. And in New Brunswick are the Freeze of Fredericton, Port City Fog of St. John, and the Moncton Mystics.
The Port City Fog. For those of our American viewers, St. John is known as the Port City. Very cool name.
Yeah,
Brad, tell us a bit about your sponsors, maybe what the ticket prices will be like, and who your target market is going to be.
We've had incredible success, actually, whether the timing is right. I mean, the league was designed to keep women in sport, whether as players, coaches, managers, officials, you name it, anything around the game. So it certainly found a niche. And we have 2 founding partners in Medavie and Royale who signed on for 3-year commitments, which is fantastic. Those are 2 international brands and certainly well known in the country. And then each of the 6 teams also have done very well in the community with partners, with businesses. And it's not easy during this time, during COVID and shutdowns and restaurants that have been reduced, but the response has been fantastic. So we're incredibly happy with that. What we're doing, it is designed towards family. And I'll speak for my franchise in Fredericton. Leah Bowers is our player coach. And Leah has 4 children under the age of 6, which just sounds incredible. And she's she's first one at the open gyms, last one to leave, remarkable. And she's going to have, I said, well, we're going to have 4 fans for sure with her children, but none of the 6 teams put anything in the bottom line for attendance because it's a brand new product. How is it going to be received? So for instance, when that opening weekend, we're looking at like a $20 weekend pass because we're not sure. We know the product's going to be good because we know the players that are getting ready to suit up. But we also, the last thing we wanted is to overcharge and somebody go away grumbling saying that's not worth, $40 for a weekend pass or whatever it is. So we're starting slow. We want to make sure that we are family affordable. And if mom and dad and 2 or 3 children can come to our game and go away and have some fun, I think, that's the nail we're looking to pound.
Excellent. Evan and I, we've been trying to get a sponsor for 3 years now. We've got nothing. So, but I think it says a heck of a lot more about our show than the economy. But Evan, you have one last question for Brad.
Yeah, Brad, you mentioned at the start that you had some conversations with Coach Lisa back in the early stages. Lisa, former guest on the show. I guess I'll ask you the same thing we asked her, but realistically, we're seeing so many quality players from Canada going down and playing NCAA Division I, and there's high-level players staying in Canada, playing in youth sports. Do you think there's a possibility of a professional women's team in Canada?
Of a professional women's team, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of support for the WNBA coming to Toronto, and it makes sense with the Raptors' success. And I think the Raptors championship a couple of years ago certainly opened a lot of people's eyes to, Canada is producing basketball players at an alarming rate, actually, which is very good. And so I think at that level, sure, I think Toronto would probably be a natural. Montreal would be another one, maybe Vancouver, who knows? But I think that is probably coming. I think for another version, I talked to Mike McKay, who's just been tremendous. He's with Canada Basketball and high performance for the women. And he said Canada doesn't need the WNBA in terms of a complete entity. It just needs its own league. And I think that's why the basketball community in this country is incredibly small and very helpful. So Lisa's been great. Mike Morreale, the commissioner of the Canadian Elite Basketball League, has been a huge help for us and just available at any time. And I think the CEBL has produced a tremendous model despite COVID, and then playing through it and just coming out the other end, hopefully stronger. And that could be a model that the country could see on the women's side as well. And we know we've got a lot of eyes on us through Canada Basketball and other people saying, how is this going to go? Because it's not easy when you're, especially in the women's side, if you want to go and play Division III in Belgium or something, and the conditions aren't always great, to play in Halifax or to play in Fredericton or Lethbridge or who knows, I think is something that we'd like to see down the road. So if we can play a small part in that building, it had to start somewhere. We're strictly an amateur league. We're not professional, but we've said all along we want to create a professional feeling for this. And we have a lot of good people involved that know marketing and public relations. So, if we could just be that little spark to start something. And Mr. Morreale said it best, the first year of the CEBL looked nothing like the second and third year. And I think that's what we're probably going to experience as well.
Great. Well, it certainly seems like everyone up there has done their homework, and we're wishing you the best of luck. He is Brad Janes, founder of the Maritime Womens Basketball Association, which starts its inaugural season next month throughout New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. So we hope some of our viewers go out and catch a game. Brad, thanks so much for coming on the show, and best of luck with the new league.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Coming up next on Small Town Spotlight, we start our third trip around the country with a stop in Alberta to chat with a radio legend. You're watching Mick and T's Sports Report on CHCO from picturesque St. Andrews, New Brunswick. It's time for another edition of Small Town Spotlight here on CHCO. You can always watch our show on the CHCO YouTube channel, but since the station is also available on Bell Satellite throughout Canada, you can also watch our show on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights if you live in Princeton, British Columbia, Princeton, Ontario, or Princeton, Newfoundland. This is our 27th edition of Small Town Spotlight and the start of our third trip across Canada. Since we go alphabetically by province, it's time to head to Alberta and the town of Onoway, located about 1 hour northwest of Edmonton with a population of 1,029. 20 years ago, veteran broadcaster Bob Chelmick proposed a radio program that brought together a few of his passions: music, poetry, storytelling, and the quiet country life at a cabin in the forest. He made the pitch to CKUA, the public radio network in Alberta, and the rest, as they say, is history. To tell us more about the area and his show, let's welcome in broadcasting legend Bob Chelmick. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hi, Joe. Thank you very much for having me. That's fantastic. I love being with you here. So the area of this boreal forest in north central Alberta, Canada, Turtle Island, as the indigenous people call North America, is just that. It's poplar forest mostly. It's called aspen parkland forest. The aspen poplar are most predominant. And I have 160 acres here, a quarter section, as we call it on the prairies, as it was cut up in nice square pieces by in the early 1900s by the surveyors. And so we have a quarter section here, 160 acres. And when I got it, it was all forests. And that was 25 years ago. And my dad and I kind of took a string or a rope and just surveyed our way into the middle of it, cut an area with the bulldozers that we could drive through, and then started building a cabin. And I built a cabin 25 years ago. And this is where we are. We now have about 25 acres cleared in the middle of the quarter section of forest. That's all we need. And we've had wonderful animals on it and mostly wildlife on it.
Great, great. Now, you were originally at CKUA Radio and then came back about a quarter century later. So what was behind that decision?
Man, that makes me seem really old. I think I am. Yeah, we're 28 years away. I started as a whippersnapper, Joe. I think I was 19, still going to college, and they hired me to rip and read, as they say in the news business, on the weekends. I would come in and build a newscast from the paper that was coming over the teletype and read a newscast for 5 or 10 minutes. And then as I graduated from broadcast arts, I was given a show called The Mixed Bag, which introduced new albums like from the Beatles or from the Grateful Dead or Janis Joplin. That was the era. That was in the 1960s. And I was there for 4 years, and then television came calling, and I went there, started my television career, and was away for 28 years, and then left TV. I was anchoring the newscast in Edmonton for CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Network. And I was away from broadcasting for a little while, but CKUA Radio actually was my first love and best love. So when CKUA wanted me to come back, I jumped at the chance. It's a fantastic, unique outlet. It's donor supported. It's gone through a lot of iterations since 1927 when CKUA started. UA stands for University of Alberta, but its license no longer held by the U of A probably 75 years ago. And then it went through a whole bunch of different support systems, government support systems. And then in the late part of the 20th century, they cut us adrift. But the people who were passionate about this rare radio stood up and said, no, I'm going to throw some money at you to keep you going. And that's how it's been since then, since the late 1990s.
Great. Now, I was looking on your website, and there's a great quote on there from an American poet, Jack Gilbert, that says, "A child was asked whether he liked radio or television best, and the boy said radio because the pictures were better." Now, with that lead in, tell us a bit about your radio show.
I'm glad you brought that up, that Jack Gilbert. The medium of radio is much more intimate than television. It just brings you in because your imagination is involved. Marshall McLuhan, you know, the great guru
Yes.
of media in the 20th century, was from Edmonton, about 80 kilometers down the road from here, down the gravel and pavement. And Marshall said that radio was a hot medium and television a cool medium, because television doesn't involve the imagination so much. It just feeds you stuff. But radio, you have to automatically, your imagination is engaged. So that's why singer-songwriters do so well, because they can, a good singer-songwriter can paint a fantastic picture, which is different for everyone and similar to everyone, with everyone as well. So my program, given that, and I was conscious of that from the very beginning, and I've also used another rule of thumb, and that is never talk to a bunch of people on the radio. It's an intimate medium between you and one listener. And if you keep that in mind, instead of saying, how are you all out there? Instead of saying, you should say, how are you today? How are you feeling today? Or in words, not maybe so directly, but you talk to that one person. So you tell stories. And that's this radio program is a lot about story. The stories come from poets like Jack Gilbert or Jalaluddin Rumi from 13th century Persia, and Mary Oliver from upstate New York, I think, that she later died in Florida. Great poets, but also I tell stories about my horses, and I will take the microphone out to feed them in the middle of the winter. So you hear the squeak of the snow, and then you hear the beautiful sound of the horses eating oats. If you ever listen closely, it's a gratifying sound, knowing as a human, you've helped them get through a cold, cold night with a little grain. And I'll tell those kinds of stories too. The coyotes will start howling in the background through the microphone. The birds, and especially in the spring, will start their symphony, their cacophony, and that'll be part of the radio program. It's always had a sense of place. So yes, we tell individual stories on a given episode, and poets and singer-songwriters do too. The lyrics of the songs are more important than most other programs for me on the road home. So because I weave them with the poems and with the music, and I will elongate the instrumental parts of the music in a digital framework so that the poems fit better. I will read them, or the poets will read them. And that's how we tell stories, and that's how we have a sense of place. And that's what makes this radio program, The Road Home, weird. I mean, where else are you going to hear coyotes howling in the background when the announcer's telling a story about what the dogs were doing today?
Right. Now, among other things, you've been an internationally exhibited photographer, filmmaker, documentary producer, and now you're going to be a man on the move. Tell me about your new home starting in May.
It's quite revolutionary, Joe. I mean, as I say, this program has been built on this sense of place, and now I'm changing places. And so Wife in the Woods, Janice Beaton, my darling, and I, her people are from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, a magical island. We got married there 9 years ago, and her mom's still there, 87. So I never thought I'd leave this place, frankly. It was my life's work. I started with the raw forest and kind of shaped it into what I love today about it, sculpted it, if you will, and built fences and gardens and things like that. And yet it started to work on me. I think Wife in the Woods started to work on me. And I love going to Cape Breton as a visitor. And so I just thought, maybe it is time. If I'm ever going to reinvent myself with a different space, this better be the time. And so I just decided to do that. So I didn't even tell Janice. I kind of put it up on Kijiji, really, to sell this property. And I told a story, and since I'm a photographer, I had a collection of pretty good photographs of the birds around here, the animals, the sunsets, the trees in autumn. And so I put that up on this Kijiji, a free sales site like Craigslist in the States. And I just put this up and people started responding, and somebody came forward. I said, we don't want to sell it to a developer. We want to sell it to someone who shares our vision. And so they take this as a custodian, the next generation of custodians taking this forest forward and keeping it well. So that's what went into the thinking of the move. It's quite sudden, and here we go. Come May the 2nd, we hand the keys over to the paradise here, and we find another one in Cape Breton. We have a forest, a cleared lot just recently, and we'll start to build another life there.
Great. Well, now that you will be in Nova Scotia soon, you're just a ferry ride and a short drive to Connecticut, where I am. So the invite is out for you and the wife and the dogs to head down. And as I always tell our guests, I will introduce you to the wonders of New Haven's world famous thin crust pizza.
You're on, Joe.
There you go. And as we head out for this interview, we'll be playing a recording of your reading of the poem, The Road Home by Rumi, accompanied by some gorgeous background pictures from your website at roadhome.fm. Bob, I
Cool.
can't thank you enough. I've started listening to your show through an app called Radio Garden and was mesmerized by it and said, I'm going to try to get this guy on the show, and I'm glad it worked out.
Come on, Joe. You were mesmerized, and it puts you to sleep every night, you tell me. So
in a good way. In a good way.
Program we're talking about here.
Great. Bob, thanks so much for coming on the show.
The road home is home. This poem by Jalaluddin Rumi, The Road Home. An ant hurries along a threshing floor with its wheat grain, moving between huge stacks of wheat, not knowing the abundance all around. It thinks its one grain is all there is to love. So we choose a tiny seed to be devoted to, this body, one path, or one teacher. Look wider and farther. The essence of every human being can see, and what that essence eye takes in, the being becomes. Saturn, Solomon. The ocean pours through a jar, and you might say it swims inside the fish. This mystery gives peace to your longing, and makes the road home, home. And that's the signature poem for this program by Jalaluddin Rumi.
And we're back. And just to add another thing to our list of accomplishments, we have to be the only sports show that's had somebody read a poem.
Well, at least since that time you read the old "There Once Was a Girl from Nantucket" poem, but we won't get into that. Yeah, he's got awesome radio voice by Bob. All right, let's go straight to the shout outs as we are running out of time. What do you have?
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to the UMB women's hockey team, who for the first time made it to nationals this year. Lost a tight one in the semifinals, but I know everyone in Fredericton's really proud of them. The program's just been back for 4 years, so hats off to Coach Hillwith and her squad for some incredible play over the season.
Very impressive. And I will go with my shout out to my niece Tessa on her 21st birthday. And I told her I'd embarrass her by throwing up a picture of her. That's her in one of her artsy poses there. I have no idea what she was doing, but I told her I'd give her a shout out. And she's just the best, real hardworking, caring, and quite a funny girl also. So Tess, in honor of your 21st birthday from Uncle Joe, that's what he said. She's a huge Office fan, so I told her I'd throw that in. All right, well, that's it for episode 35 of Mick and T's Sports Report. I'm Joe in New Haven.
And I'm Evan here in St. Andrews, New Brunswick.
Thanks to CHCO station manager Patrick Watt and editor Flo Castleberry Mitchell. Flo Castleberry was the sassy waitress on the 70s sitcom Alice. I know no one's ever heard of that, but at any rate, Patrick and Flo do a tremendous job of producing and editing a show that after a long delay is finally available on VHS and beta. And now that we've once again come to the end of another show, we'll leave you with peace, love, and the road home. This is Mick and T's Sports Report on CHCO-TV. We'll see you next time.